welcome aboard our celestial vessel, where we embark on a transformative journey through healing on Mars.
As your compassionate guides, we navigate the vast expanse of mental well-being, sharing our own experiences, insights, and the collective wisdom of experts.
Together, we explore the cosmos of emotions, destigmatize mental health, and cultivate a sense of connection among fellow space travelers.
Prepare to launch into a universe of healing, growth, and self-discovery like never before.
Welcome back to Healing on Mars. I'm Naya.
And I'm Amanda.
And we are here
today discussing letting go.
Yeah.
More specifically, letting go of relationships, with whether that is a friendship, a family member, or a significant other. There's a lot of reasons why an individual might need to let go of a relationship. We're going to talk a lot about that in more detail. So there's a lot of reasons why an individual might need or want to leave a relationship. It's a very normal experience of being a human being, even though sometimes that's looked down upon. One being abusive relationships.
Yes, and that could be family or your friends. And it's really hard to leave those relationships because they've been a part of your life. They're part of your story. And change is scary. Change is difficult. You have to get uncomfortable in order to eventually get comfortable. And it's really hard to do that.
Yeah, especially if you've known this individual for a long time, and even time not being a factor. If you've created a significant attachment to this individual, it can be extremely difficult to leave them, especially for abusive relationships, because it might mimic an attachment that you've had in childhood with a caregiver that was not so healthy. And it could be replaying out that pattern of behavior as a feeling of familiarity, which can seem safe, and it can seem like it's the right place to be, but familiarity does not mean safety.
Yeah, for the most part, I have a pretty anxious attachment style, and so I'll find people, and it won't be on purpose. Like, you don't do it on purpose to find people who are just like your parents, or, if you needed comfort, they left. And so it's very interesting how that works when you don't know how they're going to react, what they're going to be like in the relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just the push and pull of an abusive relationship, the honeymoon phase to the blow up stage to the repair, and then the cycle continues, that can become extremely addicting. That in of itself can make it very difficult for an individual to leave a relationship. And then when that's compounded by a traumatic past and a history of abuse, that can make it even more difficult to leave, because you're susceptible to these vulnerabilities of not being able to pick up on red flags, not being able to set boundaries for yourself, and having a higher tolerance for behavior that others would deem as extremely inappropriate or extremely violent or abusive. Just being able to withstand that type of behavior because it's so familiar to you.
Yeah, and it's very interesting to see how people react from letting go of friendships or romantic relationships versus family, because when you're in an abusive relationship, everybody's going to tell you, you need to leave. This is bad for you. You can't do this. But if it's a family member, oh no, they're your family. You can't let go of your family because they love you.
Yeah, it's a pretty interesting dichotomy about like how people place value on families over other types of relationships, when in of itself they could be just as impactful as the other. Just because someone's your relative doesn't mean that relationship is less impactful as a romantic partner or a friendship. Just because they're blood relative of yours, it doesn't mean that they should have complete access to you and disrespect you. I mean, the way that my philosophy is about family is that it's not the importance of the blood that you share, but the respect that you share amongst one another, because the key founding foundations of any relationship to be sustainable and to be healthy is really trust and respect.
And my whole thing, personally, I'm just like, if I wouldn't let a stranger treat me like this, I'm not letting you treat me like this. I don't care if it's you, Mom, love you, but you could fuck right off.
Yeah, absolutely.
Respectfully.
No, absolutely, because just because that person has a title that someone might deem as important or they might connect with in a positive way because they have a positive relationship with their mothers doesn't mean that relates the same to another individual. I mean, I would like to think that children want to attach to their parents. I mean, and in childhood, we need that attachment to survive. Oh,
yeah. It's only natural. That's what you know your whole life.
Yeah. So to shame someone for getting to that place where they actually needed to break that attachment, they needed to step away in order to save themselves. They were making a huge sacrifice. I mean, just makes you think, how hard did this person try to make this relationship work? And not to say that this is the same case all the time, but in cases of abuse, that individual may have tried very hard to sustain that relationship. And at the end of the day, they had to choose themselves and they had to love themselves enough to walk away.
Childhood shapes how you interact with people in adulthood.
It doesn't just go away just because, oh, whoa, we're adults now. That's crazy.
I grew up with an anxious attachment style. I know my parents tried their best if they're listening to this, whatever. But when I was a child, and I was a very emotional child, I cried at everything. You could say hi and I'm going to cry. And I cried so much that when I wanted to talk about my feelings, my dad would say, no, I'm not going to talk to you until you stop crying. And then we could talk like grown-ups. Which, first of all, I wasn't a fucking grown-up, but that's not the point. Mm-hmm. So I learned to just kind of hold that in and not talk about my emotions. And at the same time, while that was happening, I would try to get comfort from my mom, and she would push me away, not want to deal with me, and close the door. And so I was so anxious. I would try to reach out. But then as I got older and started dating, I started finding myself attracted to people who had an avoidant attachment. There was this one girl I was dating, and girl, anytime we would fight, I'd be crying, and I'm like, I need you right now. I need your attention. I need you to hug me. And she would stonewall. I fucking hate stonewallers because it's like, I'm telling you what I need. I'm literally here. You're avoiding eye contact. You're not giving me what I need. And now you remind me of my mama.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the pattern that you found in these partners was emulating a lot of the behavior that you received from your parents growing up, the lack of affection, the dismissal of your needs and your feelings. The way that you tried to reach out to get those needs met was by either crying or making somewhat of a scene to get their attention, but that never worked.
Right. And then, unfortunately, when I started dating again, I found somebody who was pretty secure and was meeting my needs. And I was like, absolutely not. I'm out. Bye. Peace. Deuces. Because you're not giving me the toxicity that I need. You're not avoiding me. I'm so used to the imbalance and
the push and pull.
Yeah, I'm so used to the push and pull, and basically that wasn't giving me that.
Yeah, no, it didn't fit the narrative that in this book I just recently read called Unfuck Your Brain. She makes a point that says, we may attach to people who allow us to play the same tapes over and over again. So at that point, you didn't really have the tools or skills to really even identify what was wrong or to deal with your emotions. I mean, you had been suppressing them for so long and unable to really feel okay and process them. So someone who feels secure might put you in a position that forces you to deal with those issues. That wasn't the time. You weren't ready for that. You wanted to keep kind of putting yourself in a triggering position because your body felt like that was the way to healing.
Yeah. I'm so used to being in fight or flight when it comes to confrontation and stuff that doesn't even need to be fought about. Literally, it could be anything.
It's just what feels so at home to you.
Yeah.
And again, like we said, familiarity and what home in quotation marks is doesn't necessarily equate to safety in our body or regulation in our nervous system.
What kind of attachment style do you have?
Well, I have a very similar one.
Hey, twinsies!
And it's an attachment. It's an anxious attachment style. So I've done a lot of work. I've done
Proud
a lot
of you.
of
I'm so proud of you.
I'm not perfect, of course. I still
You are
have
in my
issues. I still have a lot of shit that, you know, it needs to be processed. But I have gotten much better at this, but evidently my growing up, at least this was more prominent, where I never, as a child, I never got my needs met. That wasn't a thing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even know if I would categorize it anxious. It might have been disorganized attachment.
Honestly, yeah.
like it looked anxious sometimes. Maybe I was just anxious, but really my parents were never a place for safety or consistency. They were an object of fear or just complete dismissal. So I never got my needs met through them. And as an adolescent, I really surrounded myself not only with romantic partners who emulated this disorganization, but also friends
Ooh.
who also had this disorganization. And we created these bonds based off of our own need for healing. We all had a lot of fucking trauma, and we really needed to start doing the work. But we were in no position to do that. We had no autonomy. We were still in the very disruptive, chaotic environments as children. And that's usually where I met more people who also lived in chaos. And we had a lot to bond over because of this chaos. And as I grew up into an adult, I found romantic partners who were emotionally stunted, unavailable, and incapable of processing their own trauma. And I eventually found myself in a pretty abusive relationship with a person I will not name. They were very narcissistic, so therefore my needs were never met. And that relationship took a huge toll on me and honestly felt extremely addicting. I felt like in that relationship, I needed that person to survive.
Did you feel like whenever they would sprinkle a little bit of attention, you grabbed onto it so much that you held onto it, and then they would stop giving you attention, and then they would sprinkle in a little bit more eventually, and that's what kept the cycle going?
That is a dynamic that happens in some relationships. However, in this one, it was a little different. This individual gave me attention, and he did pull back when he wasn't getting his way. It was a form of punishment, but it was very complex dynamic, and it never starts off as simple as one would think. It doesn't start off as abusive and chaotic in the beginning. Absolutely not. You would never get hooked.
Fucking love bombing. That shit feels amazing.
Yeah. And especially for someone who never got their own needs met, had low self-esteem, low self-worth. Love bombing, I'm the perfect fucking victim. So that felt great. Not to say that I don't have any accountability in where, you know, these were the decisions I've made, but there's factors that go into why I made those decisions.
You're reacting to what was happening.
Exactly.
It's only natural for that to happen. What, are you going to sit back and be like, I accept this and love this very much?
Oh, I mean the whole abuse as in whole. But I mean, at the same time, that is kind of victim blaming. I ignored a lot of red flags because honestly, I had a high tolerance for it living in the environment I grew up in. And these red flags were not enough of a deal breaker for me when it came to getting my needs met and finally feeling like I was finally going to get the love and acceptance that I needed from myself so badly. So I was finally getting that need met. I hadn't got met in so long. All these red flags, they weren't shit. I could overcome them. I could get through it. If this means I finally feel fucking loved, hell yeah. And that's why it's so addictive. And that's why individuals who experience abuse fall into this situation where they're susceptible because they have a high tolerance and they're desperate for it.
Yeah, no, I agree with you that it can be addictive. And that's not just in romantic relationships. That could show up in friendships too. I remember when I moved out when I was 18, I had this best friend and I thought we had a pretty good relationship. And we moved in together, found out she was a fucking narcissist. But at the time, I was like, oh my gosh, whenever she gives me positive attention, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to eat this shit up. I love this girl so much. And then she would go back to her bullshit ways and emotionally abusive ways. And I'd be like, oh my God, I need her to like me. So I would do the most ridiculous things, like buy her jewel pods, buy her something expensive, buy her something that she'd like so that she likes me for a little bit, bake her some cookies.
So you're really trying to do anything to win this person's affection back because it felt so scary to not have that in your life.
Yeah, and I think I let it go on for the whole year that I was living there until the lease ended. That's when I kind of snapped out of it and I was like, I need to beat this bitch up. Which I didn't, you know, because you step back and you realize, oh, the shit that I went through was not normal. That was actually a load of bullshit. It would be interesting if everybody could step back and realize what was happening. I'm sure it would be a much different case, but it's so fucking hard to do that.
Yeah, even with self-awareness, sometimes individuals don't have the skills.
Yeah.
Don't have the energy. I mean, after someone's been abused for so long, they lose a lot of self-confidence, self-esteem, energy, and they're not in a great place. They're not as strong as they were when they got into that relationship. They've lost a lot of their oomph in order to stand on their own, their ability to even believe themselves.
Girl, I did not recognize myself after that year at all. I was like, oh yes, I can recognize what she did to me and how awful she was to me. And then got into an emotionally abusive relationship 2 seconds later. Actually, I think I was in that relationship at the time. And the same exact thing happened.
So it's just that dance. You're dancing the same dance and just with a different partner because your brain is still in this place where it just wants to recreate this pattern because there hasn't been a new resolution.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what happens a lot of the time. When we've experienced abuse in the past, we might find people who emulate that individual who hurt us just so that we can recreate the event and have a new outcome. And the problem with that is if you're looking for same or similar features as that first person, you're more or less likely to find that you're going to come out with the same outcome. So you're not going to find this new revelation. The person's not going to give you the ending, and they're ultimately never going to be the person that you truly wanted to receive that love from.
Yeah. As you start working on yourself and healing, you're not going to find what you wanted in the same person, or it's not going to serve you anymore. I'm just so proud of us. As we're sitting here talking, I'm just like, wow.
Yeah, we've come a long way from you wanting to beat someone up to sitting here and talking about
wanting to beat someone up.
But not going through with it and recognizing that in those moments of wanting to hurt someone, it wasn't about hurting them. It was about just you not wanting to tolerate that type of behavior anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And understanding that you don't need to beat someone up to get your needs met. You can just leave. That's an option now. You don't feel like you need these individuals to survive anymore. That's you claiming your power and taking that power back. It's no longer based off of someone else and you needing them to feel alone. I mean, there was a long time as a child, as an adolescent, where I was terrified of being alone and being with myself. So I would force myself into these relationships, or I would beg to have these people in my life, or terrified of them to leave because I couldn't comprehend being alone.
And it makes sense. Honestly, I was the same way. I don't think from when I was 15 to about 21, I was not single at any point in those years. So you felt, since you weren't receiving it from anybody, the next most comfortable, most safest option is to receive it from a romantic partner and just keep that cycle going with different partners just for a form of survival.
Absolutely. It was absolutely living in survival mode, just trying to get through the next day. And being alone meant that I had to face the things that I wasn't ready to face or had the skills to deal with. The depression, the anxiety, the flashbacks, the PTSD. I mean, it was all too overwhelming and hard to deal with. So I needed to constantly distract myself. I mean, now that I'm not in that place anymore, I love my time alone. I mean, honestly, I find that I don't have enough time alone. Like, I'm doing a lot of things, not because I'm trying to avoid myself, but because that I have a lot of goals that honestly
you
require
love yourself.
A lot of time.
Yeah.
So
you want to do things for you instead of other people for once.
And how difficult is it to leave if you feel like you need that thing to survive or you need that thing to feel okay? How are you going to detach when you can't imagine a life without that distraction?
And granted, I know it's very, very difficult to leave when that's all you're used to. I mean, at the end of the day, you're grieving a person, like I said earlier. You're grieving the loss of somebody who met your needs, who made you feel quote unquote safe, even though it wasn't safe, comfortable. And you literally go through the stages of grief. I mean, what's the first stage? Denial. Okay. Just so I can do a little interactive thing. We have a boyfriend.
Okay.
The audience, whoever's listening has a boyfriend. His name is Jake. He's a fucking asshole. Jake cheated on us. Can you believe it?
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Jake needs to go fuck himself.
He needs to go fuck himself. We find out that Jake cheated on us. And we're like, no, he would never. He would never.
And us, like, who said that? Like, we need to fight them.
Yeah.
Like, they're lying to us. How dare them?
How dare them? And then, what's the second stage? Anger.
Well, we want to go fight someone.
Yeah.
Or no. At this point, we've come to grasp that Jake did cheat on us. So now we want to fight Jake.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, we're going to go to Jake now, and we're going to go yell at him.
Like, how dare you? How dare you do this to me? How dare you do something that I didn't deserve? Yeah, you start to ask, why did they hurt me? Why they did the things that impacted you? And then there's the bargaining, which is the what ifs. And that's a very, very difficult stage. What if I had been better to Jake? What if I had sex with him 10 times a day instead of 5 times a day? Like I said, he's a scumbag. Whatever. What if? And then eventually that kind of fizzles out, and then you realize this isn't the fucking butterfly effect. So you can't change anything. And that's where you get into the depression stage.
Because you're finally accepting the reality of this loss, which is, we like to shit on people for the stage of the, oh my God, what if? And it's such a natural, normal experience to have when grieving the loss of something that means a lot.
Yeah, and you think about the good times, and that's going to make you feel sad because it's very, very strange how the brain works, because when you're grieving, you're thinking about only the good times.
Oh, yeah.
Not the bad times. But in regular day-to-day life, 80% of our thoughts are negative.
Yeah, what a coincidence.
Yeah, and then acceptance. You finally come to accept and realize Jake is a douchebag. I didn't deserve that. Like, it is what it is. It happened. Now I'm realizing, honestly, he's ugly now. Like, ugly behavior makes you ugly. And now we found Brian, and Brian is treating us like the fucking princess that we are. So, yeah, at the end of the day, letting go of a person is grieving them, grieving the person that they were, grieving the potential, which gets sticky because it's like kind of like the bargaining where it's like, oh, what if they were this type of person? Or what if I stayed longer and they actually did this and went to therapy and followed these steps and did whatever they could to make. But at the end of the day, they didn't.
Yeah.
Because we all have potential to do anything. I have potential to be an astronaut if I really wanted to.
It's also the loss of all of the time and energy that you spent investing in this individual. That was an investment. You lost an investment.
Yeah.
And it's okay to mourn the fact that you spent a lot of time and energy on this relationship and it still didn't work out. It's also, I think it gets like pretty primal. It gets to our fear of death. We become so attached to this individual and sometimes so codependent that we feel like we need this individual to survive. And at the end of that comes the fear of dying when we lose them. So it can feel like that. That's why it's so hard and so devastating. When you said coming to the final stage of grief, which is acceptance, reminds me of something that I had to learn along the way, which is we choose to suffer when we do not accept reality.
Mm-hmm.
It's a hard fucking pill to swallow because you're like, what? What do you mean? Like,
Because
this is just
it's
so
like,
painful.
Yeah. We don't want to suffer.
Yeah, we're like, what? What do you mean? We don't want to suffer. But that is the inevitable truth. We choose to suffer when we cannot accept the reality around us. And as painful it is, and not to say that it's going to happen as soon as you hear that quote, but something to consider to chip away at the framework which you believe might be, protecting you, that might actually be enabling your suffering.
At the end of the day, you're going to suffer regardless. If you left a person behind, someone who isn't being good to you, and you have to let them go, you're going to suffer. It could be a day, it could be weeks, it could be months. It doesn't matter. At the end of the day, you're still going to some degree, be sad and deal with those uncomfy, unpleasant feelings. But like you said, within that relationship with whoever it is, you're still suffering and prolonging that.
It really makes me think about, as we shift away from abuse being the reason why we leave a relationship, another reason we might leave a relationship is that it's just not healthy. It might not be to the severity of abuse, but and what healthy means might be different dependent on your needs. But if it's not fulfilling your needs and not serving you, you might have to let that relationship go. I've found in several of my relationships that I've recently had to move away from that individuals had hurt me pretty badly in the past. And as we know, just because it happened in the past doesn't mean that it's not prevalent or relevant in the future. The past doesn't just go away and become irrelevant just because it's not the present anymore. Accountability is still essential in order to have a healthy relationship with another individual. And because as I spoke about earlier, I believe the fundamental things that we need for any relationship to be sustainable is trustworthiness and respect. And accountability is a big part of respect. It's honoring that relationship. It's really owning up to the reality of what happened. It's really saying, I see you. I see how I hurt you. I see what the damage was, and I'm willing to stand with you to repair this. I really am invested in this relationship, and I'm not going to hide behind my shame because I understand this shame is painful, but it is the cost of my behavior. Actions have costs, and it comes with repercussions. We need to make up for the things that we have done in the past. And in these relationships, it's been very difficult for people to take accountability for those things. And therefore, I had to come to a place where I said, what I want and need in a relationship is reciprocity and a willingness to be vulnerable, a willingness to take accountability for their actions, and an ability to let go of the ego and the shame in order to honor the relationship and to honor my feelings and to respect me as another human being. In this most recent situation where I had to let this person go, not only did they not take accountability for the past or poorly did so. They thought they did. But I just want to reiterate, taking accountability is not just saying, I'm sorry. It's following up with not doing the same fucking shit again. And also, when you're apologizing, you're addressing how you hurt that person and talking about how you may be doing something differently in the future to prevent that or to change, or working together to solve a problem, working as a team to make sure that the relationship is honored and that behavior is not repeated. So this person, unfortunately, was not able to do that. And then on top of it, lashed out because they felt so much shame, were narcissistically wounded, that they lashed out. And once they did that, I mean, I had to respect myself, and I made it very clear we can have a conversation, but I was not going to respond to passive aggressiveness. I was not going to instigate any kind of violence. And I was going to protect and honor myself first. This individual had no intentions on putting in the work. They were really just interested in putting in the least amount of effort to just get through and to not address the past and to not to take accountability. And not just in this relationship I've had to leave recently, but in several other relationships that has echoed is, why do we have to keep talking about this? If you've ever heard someone say that to you, or if you've ever said that to someone, maybe it's because the issue has never been truly dealt with, or accountability hasn't actually been taken. Are you falling back on the things that you say? Or are you not following through and saying contradictory things or doing contradictory things to make this person believe that you're not changing? And honestly, if you have done the work to change, a little pushback shouldn't be that bad.
Like when you mentioned when you become healthier, those things, the way that they act doesn't serve you anymore. Maybe the toxicity, you both played into it and it was comfy and safe. And now that you've healed, you don't want to do the stuff that they want to do. You don't want to tolerate the bullshit that they're spewing at you if they're being like verbally abusive or something. When you're talking about becoming healthier and outgrowing that relationship, that makes sense. And
yeah, exactly. That you bring up a really good point, because this example, this event of me leaving this relationship was a sign that I had healed. It was a sign that I was valuing myself and taking the step to love myself by following through with my values, which was having meaningful, healthy relationships. The people in my life mean the world to me. I value friendships a lot. So to keep people in my life who don't honor me and don't respect me is devaluing myself, which is something I did a lot. I abandoned myself over and over and over again as a child and as an adolescent. And even though it was so fucking hard to leave this person and these people, it was harder to live with the fact that I was dishonoring myself, which is something I would have never made a priority in the past because I needed people to survive. And it goes to show I'm not in a place where I need people in order to survive.
Yeah, and just the fact that this person completely invalidated what you're saying, and you know, you feel how you feel, but nobody else can tell you how to feel. And at that point, it's just like, okay, if they're not going to respect my own feelings that is mine, feelings that no one else can tell me how to feel, bye.
Yeah, absolutely. Invalidation, lack of effort, disrespect, like all of these things are an absolute no-go. There's no tolerance for it. Where there was a lot of tolerance in the past, there's no tolerance anymore. So it just goes to show, like, a high tolerance for fucking bullshit is a reason why people stay in relationships. They're used to it, so they don't have a lot of self-esteem for themselves, so they accept the love they think they deserve.
Yeah, so another reason that someone might have a hard time leaving this relationship is because they have a savior complex and they feel the need to save and heal this person when they haven't even healed themselves, and they believe that it's their own.
Yeah, it's like their responsibility to
Yeah.
heal the other person, and that they're the only one who can do it, and what are they going to do without me, without actually understanding that we don't have the capacity to do any of that. That is their responsibility as a human being to take, as an adult human being, to take responsibility for their emotional wellness and get the help that they need to strive. And they're the only ones who can do it. Like, that's the thing. Like, no one else can do it for them.
So when you do leave, it feels like you're abandoning someone, or you're hurting them because you're scared that they might go back to the way they are. And so you're stuck in this sort of loop.
Yeah, either you feel guilty because maybe you took care of a parent when you were growing up who was sick, or you felt like it's your responsibility to people please and take care of everyone, or like you just tell yourself that what are they going to do without me? I'm the only one who can help them. I'm the only one they open up to. These are all the excuses or reasons that an individual might use to convince themselves that there's only one way of solving this problem, without acknowledging that it's really not even their place to begin with to do this work. It is, and it's people
hard
don't,
when, as a child, you feel this responsibility for your parents as a child and growing up, and then you take that behavior and then give it to someone else because you feel that's what love is, and that's how you loved your parents.
I mean, yeah, it's the same thing. It's a different pattern of dancing the same dance, but it really just goes back to guilt. Feeling like you're letting someone down, you're not being a good partner, whatever reason that you're coming up with, or an individual is coming up with to convince themselves that they're not doing enough, just bypasses the respect that they have for themselves.
What you're saying is when we put all our energy into somebody else and choose not to let go for whatever reason, we're abandoning ourselves, and that comes from low self-esteem or low self-worth, because we're not putting ourselves first.
Yeah, absolutely. We've learned to abandon ourselves in order to meet the needs of other people. And when we don't value ourselves, we're essentially setting ourselves up for failure, because the very famous quote, which has a lot of merit, which is "you can't pour from an empty cup," is absolutely true.
I love that. Yeah.
You-
Yeah, no, it makes sense. I mean, you literally can. You're going to burn yourself out. And if you don't have anything to give yourself, how are you going to give it to other people?
Yeah, you just can't. It's codependency. It's I'm not okay unless you're okay. And that's not healthy in of itself.
It's like you're living through somebody else.
Yeah, it's the fear of standing on your own 2 feet, or it's just this learned habit of meeting the needs of everyone else and discarding your own.
Mm-hmm.
And it's absolutely detrimental, and it's not helpful. We don't help people by trying to convince them to change. We can help people by supporting them, and by having boundaries ourselves, because that's how we show other people what boundaries are and how to treat us, how to keep us in their life, to continue having us as a support.
Yeah, so that they don't have access to us 24/7, because when we're trying to be there for them like that, in that way where it's like, if you're not okay, I'm not okay. Essentially, you're letting yourself be used, but it won't be in like a malicious way.
Yeah, you're essentially burning yourself out.
Yeah.
You're leaving yourself with nothing to give, which if you have no boundaries, it's a matter of how long can this relationship last until it doesn't last anymore, because it's not going to sustain itself. A relationship without boundaries is not sustainable. It's detrimental, and it's how much can you tolerate not having your needs met until you eventually blow up.
Yeah, before you resent the person and you mentally clock out, and then it's like you have no choice but to throw the relationship away because you're so mentally exhausted, so mentally clocked out that you have nothing to give at that point, even nothing.
Yeah, and a boundary, when you're setting a boundary, which I'd like to clarify, a boundary is for yourself. It's not a demand of another person, it's for you. If you're saying, I can only meet you here this much time during the week. It's not just saying to that other person, hey, this is what I'm asking of you to do because this is what I need. It's actually following through that thing with action. You're going to clarify what it is that your boundary is: short, sweet, to the point, to the person that you care about, so they understand your intention. But then you're going to follow up with action. So the real boundary is you showing up for yourself.
Yeah.
It's you, even though they called you a million times, not answering. It's you not going over their house when you said you needed that space. It's not you going on the phone with them and calling them and telling them, hey, I told you this. I had this conversation with you, X, Y. No. The boundary is, I need this time. You are deliberately setting that time up for yourself and following through, because you're training yourself, you're teaching yourself that you can be accountable towards yourself, just like you can be accountable to other people.
Yeah, because you could say anything and everything and set the most perfect boundaries, but it's not a boundary unless you follow through with it, because, yeah, like you said, it's for yourself. It's not for other people. You can't ask other people to do something. You can only tell them what your specific needs are and what you're going to do to follow through. And if you don't go through that, then that's not a boundary. It's just a statement. Mm-hmm. You're just saying words.
Yeah, and it's pointless, and it's a skill to have, and it's again, depending on the severity of the reason why you're not leaving the person for whatever reason, it might take more than obviously these sets of skills, but an essential skill to have is setting boundaries.
Yeah, and it's not easy. It is a tough pill to swallow when you do realize, like, oh, maybe I am not setting boundaries. I mean, to this day, I'm still learning how to set boundaries. Every day, I'm still learning how to do stuff to take care of myself. And boundaries is a very difficult one, especially when it comes to the people that you care about. You always want to show up for your people. You have to realize that it's as much as you want to show up for other people, you have to show up for yourself first. It's like on an airplane, they tell you to put your own mask on before you put the oxygen mask on your child, because they need you. Mm-hmm. You can't put it on them and then you pass out and you're not there for your kid.
Yeah, that's just pointless.
Yeah, or like maybe you don't even get the chance to put it on your kid. So yeah, it's important to put yourself first and
just to recognize that you have needs that need to be met. I think like the key things to remember, and obviously just by hearing these things doesn't change the way that you might feel, but and maybe it can help to fortify just as an affirmation that you don't, just to know that you don't get to set the parameters of what makes something better or worse for someone else. Telling someone what they should do, think, and feel is not helpful for them. Even if you are correct, all this does is create discourse, and the individual may create distance or close off from listening to you because they're not ready to make that change.
And that's exactly why therapists don't tell you what to do or don't try to insinuate something. They'll most of the time ask you questions, try to like maybe lead you down a certain path, but won't specifically tell you what to do, because that's not helpful. No. Unless the person is ready to do that, and unless they outwardly ask you for that information, it's not something that you should be giving up as much as you want to, as much as, say, even though you're 110% right. It's a matter of their readiness, and people are ready at different times, and that's okay.
Yeah, it's just the nature of change, and it's as you said, it's a hard pill to swallow, but we need to be able to accept that people don't just change because we want them to.
Yeah.
Regardless of how much we might sound convincing, or we may think that we're really convincing them, how many talks we've had with them, how many tantrums we've thrown, how many displays of sadness that we've had, with that other person. That's not necessarily going to make them change.
Yeah, and it's not to say that that relationship can't be revisited at another time, but if at that certain time it's not working for you, then you can always let go and say in the future you decide to reconnect based off of how much they've changed or how much they've shown you. Like, I'm at this state in my life. It doesn't guarantee 100% that they're gone from your life. It's just you're doing what's best for you at that time. And you're going to find other relationships that, as you grow, you're going to find people to grow with you and have a good support system for that being at that time of your life.
Yeah, we change as people, so our needs change. Like we said earlier, as we heal, as we grow, the types of people come and go out of our life, which is a very natural thing. And it could be really tough to deal with, but it is a natural part of life. People come and go, just as much as change is inevitable. So, like you said, if people decide to grow with you, and in the same ways as you, and that relationship serves you in some sort of capacity, then you might be able to rekindle that friendship or relationship, whatever relationship that was, again in the future. But it's important to assess what your values are in order to make sure that the people in your life match your values. So that brings us to some more skills that can help support an individual transition into leaving and letting go of another individual that is not serving them. I think beyond what we just mentioned, boundaries, another really crucial skill to have is mindfulness.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And mindfulness, it's a practice. You don't grow it overnight, or you don't master it overnight, but there's little things that you can do just so that you're aware of your feelings in that moment, in that time, and over time you get better at it. Like you said, it's a skill.
I mean, mindfulness is really essential because it's the first step to working on a problem. If you're not cognizant of what that issue is, or you can't see from your own perspective because you're too close to the issue, or it's too triggering, or whatever is blocking that thing from your perception, from your consciousness, then you're not going to be able to take any step toward changing.
Yeah, the first step to change is awareness.
So you need that mindfulness. Mindfulness is a skill. It is a muscle that you build over time. Like you said, it doesn't get built in a day. So it does take some patience. It does take some consistency. There's different ways to build mindfulness skills, mindfulness meditation.
There's apps. There's some really good apps out there. YouTube videos, guided meditations, especially for like me who can't focus by myself and meditate by myself. I love guided meditations because, one, I'm being mindful, and two, it's like I'm doing it along with somebody else, so I feel more comfortable and almost as if it's like an accountability buddy who's not there.
Yeah, I mean, I get really distracted very easily, so having those guided meditations work wonders for me. So that's just another tool to have in your toolbox. And beyond that, if it's trauma, if that's the underlying issue, then it might be really helpful to seek trauma treatment, like specifically trauma-informed care, like not just a regular therapist for CBT. Like there's certain specialties for certain topics.
Yeah, there's different types of trauma treatment.
Well, there's different types of trauma treatment, but there's different types of therapy in general. And you're going to not want to just go to a regular schmegular therapist. You're going to seek out someone who specifically has training in trauma treatment, regardless of what that treatment is. Whatever your preference is of the type of trauma treatment, you can look into that further. But you're really going to want to find someone who specializes in this topic, because they're going to be able to help you do that work to help uncover some of the underlying issues that are preventing you from making these changes in your life.
Yeah, you could go to cognitive behavioral therapy for years, and it could be some really good skills that you're learning, but if it's not the right type of treatment, say there are some things that like you really need to uncover, and trauma is very, very complex. And so not just anybody can work with you and help you through that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's the same kind of idea as like you wouldn't go to a podiatrist if you had heart issues. You go to a cardiologist for your heart problem, someone who specializes in that particular issue. So, that could be really helpful. It's another skill, another tool. I mean, I wouldn't say it's a skill, but they can teach you skills. So that could be definitely a great resource to have. And talking about like exercises and resources, I mean, I think you were mentioning one earlier. What do you think is a good exercise for an individual who's on the fence about whether or not they should keep someone in their life?
Ooh. I mean, personally, I've done this a couple of times, but pros and cons lists. I've had to do that for relationships, like romantic relationships, mostly. It's hard to see something that is toxic in somebody unless you write it down on paper. You have to visualize it and then recall everything. Okay, what is good about this person? What have they done for me? What do I appreciate about them? And then the cons list. How do they make me feel? Is it negative? Do they put me down? Do they do this? Do they do that? And then just go through it and then weigh it out yourself. Which ones have more impact? Which ones are non-negotiables? And then it just helps you. It's just one tool to help you make the process easier in determining if somebody deserves to stay in your life.
Yeah, absolutely, because it can change. Just seeing it written down on paper, seeing it in front of you, getting it out of your head, being able to match it up, like sometimes even seeing how many things are in the cons list versus the pros.
Girl, you can even go as far as screenshotting things that maybe if they text you nasty or something, screenshot the things that you say, keep it in a folder, and then refer back to it and be like, oh, this is why I'm doing this. This is why I'm creating a pros and cons list, you know?
Yeah, because sometimes we can have a lot of pent up feelings about something, but then when it comes down to like someone asking you, why do you feel this way about them? It could be hard to process all of that at once. So having it written down, gathering all your evidence, kind of sitting with all of it and being like, wow, what does this mean? What does this say? And was there any attempt to reconcile any of these issues? Was there any attempt at repairing any of these problems? Because, you know, conflict happens. It's about how we repair that conflict. And if there's no attempt to repair, and avoidance was the main remedy that was used by that other individual, or you were just met with a lot of hostility, whatever that might have been, that didn't allow you to get to that resolution, that could be a really big sign that you deserve more.
Yeah, and
need more.
Conflict is going to happen in any relationship regardless, as much as we want to avoid it. Like, one thing that I appreciate about our relationship is we've discussed what are we going to do when we have a conflict, and we've talked about, I mean, thankfully we're both anxious attachment because we want to resolve it right away and talk about it. And I think we're very open with each other enough to do so. And so feeling safe enough to communicate with people and pre-plan what you're going to do when it comes down to conflict. Because, sorry, I was rudely interrupted, because it's going to happen regardless. It's inevitable.
Yeah, absolutely. Conflict is just a part of a relationship. It kind of means that you're invested in that relationship. It doesn't mean that the conflict necessarily is chaotic, but it means you've been risking something.
Yeah,
and
it's
there's
uncomfy.
Something on the line.
It's uncomfy, and that's okay. One thing that we learn about relationships over time is we can't just have the good. We can't have the fun feelings. We can't have all the good times without that sort of balance of, you know, which conflict isn't in itself bad.
Yeah, no, it's not. It's necessary. It's not about the conflict so much. Obviously, the conflict does matter, like how hard. Like
it depends.
How much was
it's
did this
situational.
person hurt me?
Yeah,
it's like, how did they repair? Like what was the repairing like, and how did they deal with the conflict? Did they run away from it? I mean, like you said, conflict is a normal part of a relationship. Just like, you know, you want to have fun, you want to play video games, you want to do whatever your hobbies are, you want to just live life and have a great time. But you know you have to brush your teeth or your teeth are going to fall out. And if you want to have teeth in your mouth, you know, maybe brushing your teeth isn't the most exciting thing or thrilling thing. Or maybe you wouldn't really want to get up from playing your video game to go brush your teeth or do that thing that you were really excited about. But you know that if you don't do it, if you don't keep up with the maintenance, that your teeth are going to fucking fall out. And if you want that relationship to thrive and grow and flourish and be healthy, you need to keep up with that maintenance and not disregard the needs of other people, because that is the basic backbone of any relationship.
Yeah, and even so, going deeper into that, like if you're trying to determine how you deal with conflict with another person and say, oh yeah, they apologize. How do they apologize? Are they holding themselves accountable or are they making excuses? You can make maybe explanations, but excuses are different. And so it's important to know the difference between the two of those and what the other person is actually saying and processing that so that you're not being deceived by whatever they're trying to mask.
Yeah, I'm sorry, but is not an apology.
Yeah. No.
There should be none of that.
Girl, as soon as I hear but, no.
It's like, no, we're not talking
Talk
about
to me
this
when
anymore.
you
come back to the table.
Yeah, when you have
ready to
actual
speak.
words to say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When you can take some real accountability without deflecting it back somewhere else or making excuses or changing the topic or talking about another time the other person made you upset instead of addressing in that moment, keeping it on topic, owning your shit, and actually addressing what happened and how you will fix it or move forward.
People will make excuses because they feel shame. I know you talked earlier about shame when it comes to you had that friend who did not validate your feelings and did not hold themselves accountable because of their deep set shame that they didn't even know that they had. And it's also important to recognize it's okay to feel shameful. It's just another one of our many feelings that we have in this big bowl, big pool of feelings that we have. And it's normal.
Yeah, no, shame is a very normal thing and it can be really scary. It can be really hard to face something that we don't feel so hot about. But I think there's a misconception when people believe that they're a bad person for owning up for your shit. You actually look like the worst when you don't say sorry. You look like a good person. If you're worried about how you look like a better person when you're able to own your shit and say, oh wow, I did fuck up. And it doesn't feel great. Like it doesn't. It's a humiliating, it can be a humiliating experience. You can feel sad about it. You may have never had the intention of hurting someone, but may have still done that and feel bad about it. Those are valid feelings. You're allowed to have your emotional experience, but that doesn't take away the necessity of sitting in that moment, being present with that other person and actually taking real accountability for the things that you've done.
Yeah, and just like anything in life, the more that you practice it, the easier it becomes and the more natural it's going to feel. Obviously, if you're not used to holding yourself accountable and sitting with that shame, it's not going to feel good. And it's never really going to feel good, but it's easier to tolerate. It becomes more natural.
Yeah, you'll have more compassion for yourself. You'll understand the humanity in making and fucking up and how like normal it is. And if you can value that other person more than you care about your, how you look, you can understand that it's worth it to sit there and apologize.
Yeah.
It matters. And it matters more than looking like the better person or feeling like the better person or being stuck in that ego.
Yeah, and I like that you said it like that because as much as we have to put ourselves first, we are always number one. But when it comes down to how we made other people feel, it's always, even if your intention was not to harm somebody, but you did harm somebody, it doesn't matter what your intention was at that point. Their feelings are still their feelings and it's valid.
Yeah, it is still valid. And there's still accountability that can be taken in those moments. So that's a big thing, being able to take accountability for the things. And if unfortunately someone can't, that might be a deal breaker. I mean, it's hard to have a sustainable relationship where people do the bare minimum to make the relationship last.
Yeah, and it's just not worth all the built-up resentment that you build over time from that because you can only handle so much.
Yeah, absolutely.
I can only handle so much, girl.
Depending on how high your tolerance is, you might be able to handle a lot, but that's not a badge of honor to wear either.
Yeah, no.
To be able to tolerate a lot of bullshit, obviously no judgment, no shame, but like, that's not serving you.
Yeah, the more you grow, the less bullshit you'll be able to tolerate.
And that allows you to just move through it and not get stuck in those moments of just trash, of shit. You can push through it. You can use those coping skills, those resources, like we talked about before, to really hoist you up and allow you to get to places that you want to be instead of being drawn into the drama, being drawn into the places that don't serve you, that drain you of your power and leave you feeling like trash. So another tip that I have, or maybe not tip, but an exercise that might be helpful when determining if a relationship is valuable or not valuable, but is serving you and whether
worth
to help
sustaining.
You decide what you want to do and the next steps you want to take, is to think about someone you care about a lot. Or to think about someone who you look up to or you would want to see you see in a very positive light, that you want good things to happen to. And think about their best friend and write down some of the behavior that their best friend should have when they to treat that person well, whether that's respecting their boundaries, being able to deal with conflict, being able to be present during difficult times, showing up to important things, and being a place for safety. Any of those values that you have, write that down and think about that list of values that you have and try to see if you can get most of those values met in that particular individual or group of people that you're thinking about, or you're on the fence about. You haven't been so sure whether or not to keep them in your life. And I mean, it's up to you what you do with that information. But when we don't follow through with our values, that's another action of self-betrayal.
Girl, that's fire. I didn't even think about it like that. I do something similar, but I'm going to have to do that later, go into my journal and write Amanda's best friend, what I want their values to be. But that's interesting. I never thought to look at it as if my best friend's best friend or somebody that I care about, how I want their best friend to treat them. I do something similar in which I'll say, how would I treat my own friend? Or how would I want to treat myself with enough kindness as if I'm my own self's best friend? And it's like, you're still a person, and it's hard to really prioritize ourselves when we live with ourselves every day and we have to deal with ourselves every day. So when you kind of look at it as if, oh, what if I was another person? It makes it easier to kind of be like, oh, well, what does that person deserve? But that person is you.
It's harder to be, if you already have low self-worth, low self-esteem, and obviously no shame there. That's a process. It's a journey of healing. But if that's a struggle for you, then thinking about someone else, it's usually a lot easier to think about what other people deserve if besides ourselves, if we struggle with that. So being able to put it in the context of thinking about someone else might make it easier to come up with a list of values that kind of honestly is a projection of your own.
Yeah.
Because you're projecting what you would want onto that other person. It's just you don't quite yet feel like you deserve it.
Yeah.
So those are just some, little exercises to do. But this could be a huge journey and road that might take some time, and that's perfectly fine.
Yeah, it doesn't happen overnight. Everything takes time. Stuff like this, especially with self-care and self-love and your own journey, that could be lifelong.
Yeah.
We never stop growing, and that's the beauty of it. It's always something new to overcome, and you only get stronger as you go on. It gets easier. It's just the hard part is starting, and that's with anything.
It could be hard along the way, too.
Oh, yeah. No. That, too. But it gets easier as you practice more.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is you become more resilient and along the way, and you gain the skills that help you. If it's hard to think about how would you manage this when you're looking at a goal and you're thinking about, oh my gosh, this goal, it's so, I don't know, even if I got to that goal, I don't know how I'd keep it. I don't know how I'd be able to live in that moment. It's hard to see humans have a very difficult time seeing how we would feel in the future. We can't predict where we'll be at, what we'll be able to manage, how we'll be able to feel in those moments in the future. We have to kind of fall back on the fact that we will learn skills along the way. We will be supported by the new information that we receive or the new skills that we develop as we grow. They'll be the things that hoist us in that direction and support us to be able to stand on our own 2 feet when we get there.
Yeah, it's like if you had a crystal ball and can see exactly where you would be in the future and pretend that it's like your perfect scenario, exactly where the exact outcome that you want it to be, then treat the present as if you're already going to get there. Like, tell yourself that you are already on that journey. You're going to get to that destination at some point. You just have to put in the work now. Maybe that perspective makes it a little easier for some.
Yeah, it's a journey. It's a journey, and we'll be right here alongside you, talking about so many different topics that will hopefully be a source of support or maybe just a place to think about, just some topics to think about along this journey.
And it may help to know that we are also on this journey. We're still learning, we're still growing. And so that's the exciting part, is we're all learning together.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we're pulling from our own experiences. We're pulling from the things that we're learning, the places that we're at, the places that we've been.
If our bullshit that we went through is going to help you, then it's all worth it.
Exactly. It's like, putting some value into these things that were not so valuable.
Yeah, not so hot.
Yeah, absolutely. We're changing the script, and we're very appreciative that you're here with us on this road.
All right, guys, we talked about some really good stuff. I want to wrap up this All right, guys, we talked about some really good stuff. I want to wrap up this episode with some affirmations that you can repeat along with us. All right? I release those who do not contribute to my growth and well-being.
I trust the journey and welcome new connections that enrich my life.
I have the strength to let go of relationships that no longer serve me.
Well, thank you everyone for joining us.
And we will be seeing you next time on Healing on Mars.
As our cosmic voyage comes to a close, we want to express our deepest gratitude for joining us on this extraordinary expedition.
Remember, dear listeners, that your mental well-being is a stellar journey, and we're honored to be a part of it.
Stay connected with us and the ever-growing Healing on Mars community.
Seek the support you deserve as we continue to explore the depths of the human experience together.
Until we meet again among the stars, may your path be illuminated by resilience, compassion, and the infinite possibilities of personal growth.
Safe travels, fellow explorers of the cosmos.